People love a simple story. And few stories in modern finance are as simple or as seductive as this one. Crypto was invented to escape banks. It's the story told in memes, whispered in online forums, shouted in podcasts, printed on TV. The banks failed us. The system is corrupt. So someone, somewhere in the shadows, created a new kind of money to burn it all down. No more middlemen. No more Wall Street. No more bankers. Just math, code, and freedom. It's a powerful story. It's also, like most powerful stories, only half true. Because the real origin of crypto doesn't begin with a single genius pressing deploy on a revolutionary coin. It doesn't start with a billionaire, or a hedge fund, or a meme. It begins decades earlier in strange corners of the internet, with a group of people obsessed with something much less catchy than escaping banks: privacy, cryptography, and the question of whether money could exist without permission from anyone at all. To understand why crypto exists, you have to rewind far past the price charts and the scandals back past Elon Musk tweets and exchange collapses. Back to a time when digital cash was just an idea in cryptography journals and mailing lists almost no one read. Back to the cypherpunks in the 1980s and 1990s. Before most people were even aware of the internet, small communities of mathematicians, hackers, and libertarians started asking a dangerous question. What happens to freedom when everything becomes digital? When letters become emails? When signatures become passwords? When identity becomes a login? Who controls the system? Their answer was simple and radical. If we don't build privacy into the foundations, someone else will build control into them. So they began to experiment, not with money at first, but with tools. Encryption for email, anonymous digital signatures, cryptographic protocols that would allow two people to transact, speak, coordinate, and share without a central authority watching every move. Eventually, the question of money became impossible to avoid. If speech needed protection, what about value? If governments and corporations could monitor every bank transfer, freeze accounts, flag suspicious activity, what did that mean for dissent, for autonomy, for any concept of financial independence? A few names started appearing again and again. David Shom, proposing DigiCash in the 1980s. Wei Dai, imagining Bimuni, writing about BitGold. Adam Back spilled in Hashcash to fight spam with proof. Each of these ideas failed commercially, but each of them solved a piece of the puzzle. How do you create a form of money that is digital, but not controlled by a single entity? How do you stop people from copying coins the way they copy files? How do you agree on a reality of who owns what, when everyone can lie? None of these people were trying to create a meme coin to get rich quick. They were trying to answer a question that had haunted cryptographers for decades. Can we design a system where trust comes from mathematics, not institutions? Then came 2008. While banks around the world were crumbling, while financial institutions that once felt immortal begged for bailouts, while ordinary people watched their savings, pensions, and homes evaporate in a matter of months, a 9-page document quietly appeared on a cryptography mailing list. It was called Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The author used a pseudonym, Satoshi Nakamoto. No photo, no company, no country, just code and an idea. Bitcoin didn't promise to bring down banks. It didn't scream about Wall Street. It didn't sell itself as revenge. It proposed something almost boring. A way for two people to send money directly to each other online without going through a financial institution. No central ledger. No single point of control. Instead, a network, a chain of blocks, a public, auditable history that everyone could see and no one could edit alone. Inside the very first block of that network, Satoshi inscribed a message: the Times 3 Jan 2009 Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. A newspaper headline, frozen inside code, a timestamp, but also a statement. Crypto didn't appear in a vacuum. It was born at the exact moment trust in the financial system was collapsing. So, yes, you could say it was invented to escape banks, But not in the shallow sense, the slogan suggests. Not to simply root around fees or annoy bankers, it was an attempt to escape something deeper. The idea that every form of money must run through a gatekeeper, that there is no such thing as value without permission. The myth says, crypto is a weapon against banks. The history says, crypto is a response to a much bigger question. What happens to money when the entire world moves online? When you look at the early Bitcoin forums, the mailing lists, the first blog posts and emails, the conversation isn't about price. It's about architecture. It's about censorship resistance. It's about whether a digital system can behave like cash final, irreversible, not dependent on trust in one institution. People weren't talking about Lambos. They were arguing about block size, Sybil attacks, Byzantine generals, and whether a network of strangers could really agree on a shared reality. Of course, banks eventually entered the picture. Some feared Bitcoin, some ignored it, some laughed. Later, they would try to regulate it, invest in it, or copy its technology for private use, but they were not the origin. Banks were the context. The stage on which Bitcoin stepped, the ghost looming over the design, not the explicit target written in the code. So if crypto wasn't born purely to escape banks, what was it born to escape? It was born to escape the assumption that money must be deeply tied to the state, that every transaction should leave a record in a system owned by someone else, that access to the economy can be turned on and off like a switch. It was born from people who had seen what happens when governments freeze accounts during protests, when capital controls trap citizens inside broken economies, when inflation silently erodes savings while officials insist everything is under control. It was born from the uncomfortable realization that in a fully digital financial system controlled from the top down, your balance is not entirely yours. It is a number you are allowed to use until you are not. Crypto, at its core, is an argument that there should exist at least one form of money that does not care who you are, where you live, what you believe, or whether your transaction fits neatly into someone else's policy. A system where the rules are transparent and enforced by code, not adjusted quietly in crisis meetings. But then, something else happened. Once an instrument of pure idealism meets the real world, it rarely stays pure. Speculators arrived. Exchanges formed. Traders, hedge funds, influencers, scammers, entire industries appeared almost overnight. For many people today, crypto is not about censorship, resistance, or permissionless systems. It is about price going up or down. It is about leverage, futures, altcoins, memecoins, fortunes made and lost while most of the world sleeps. This is where the myth becomes convenient. Crypto was invented to escape banks. Sounds heroic. It makes a good YouTube title. It gives moral weight to speculation. But it hides a more interesting, more complex origin. Crypto was invented to explore whether trust itself could be redesigned, whether mathematics could replace the central ledger, whether people could agree on money without agreeing on an authority. When you strip away the noise, one thing remains. The architecture Satoshi proposed, and thousands of projects later, modified, is not simply anti-bank. It is anti-banks, payment processors, remittance companies, card networks, even governance. They all represent central choke points in the flow of value. Crypto's early designers believed that such choke points were too powerful, too fragile, and too tempting for abuse. It's important to notice what they did not claim. They did not claim that crypto would end inequality. They did not claim that it would make everyone rich. They did not claim it would magically fix human greed. Technology doesn't erase human nature. It simply rearranges where power sits. So where does that leave us now? We live in a world where crypto coexists with banks, where some people buy coins using credit cards and store them on exchanges that look suspiciously like the very intermediaries crypto once tried to bypass, where central banks themselves are exploring digital currencies inspired by the very architecture they once dismissed, where governments use blockchains, corporations custody coins, and regulators hold hearings about something they once thought was a toy. The real origin of crypto is not a war against banks. It is a question about the nature of money, trust, and control in a digital age. Banks are one chapter in that story, not the entire book. And somewhere buried beneath the noise of speculation and the drama of market cycles, that original question still sits waiting for anyone who cares enough to ask it honestly. In a world where everything is tracked, logged, analyzed, and authorized, should there exist at least one form of money that does not ask for permission? If this changed the way you see crypto, not as a get-rich-quick game, not as a cartoon revolution, but as a technological and historical response to deep structural questions about power and trust, consider subscribing to the Economic Rewind Vault, because the more you understand the real origins of financial systems, the harder it becomes for simple slogans to control how you think. And in the next episode of Money Myths Rewind, we're going to tackle an even more explosive belief that governments will eventually ban crypto completely. Is that fear realistic? Or is it another myth used to shape markets and minds? The answer, as always, is more complicated and far more revealing than it looks on the surface. See you in the next Rewind.